The air in the conference room was thick with tension. General Emma Grant sat across from the alien delegation, her hands clasped on the polished metal table. The room was silent, save for the occasional hum of the alien translators and the soft rustle of intergalactic dignitaries shifting in their seats. The humans were out of their element, surrounded by towering beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Yet in that moment, humanity was not being treated like a new player. It was being ignored, avoided. The U.S. Resilience, Earth's most advanced warship, stood docked outside the station, waiting for its moment. The ship, a true marvel of human engineering, was designed to make a statement to the galaxy. Yet, instead of curiosity or admiration, it was met with a strange and disconcerting hesitation. The alien races had the technology to scan and analyze the ship down to its most minute detail, yet none of them would initiate the scan. "Is there a reason we are not proceeding with the scan?" General Grant finally asked, her voice steady, but her brow furrowed. The question wasn't just for formality's sake. It was the question on every human representative's mind. Why were the aliens avoiding the ship? Toreth, the leader of the Draxian delegation, shifted uncomfortably. His species had long been known for their technological prowess and their impeccable understanding of cosmic warfare. Despite their vast knowledge, they were acting strangely around this new human creation. His long, spindly fingers drummed lightly against the table as he avoided eye contact with the humans. "We have internal directives," Soreth finally responded, his voice thick with hesitation. "We are not permitted to scan your vessel at this time." Grant's eyes narrowed. There was something off about his tone. No alien in the galaxy had ever refused to scan, especially not in such a high-profile meeting. If there was one thing that the galactic powers could agree on, it was that knowledge was power, and the humans were sitting on a potential goldmine of technological secrets. "I don't understand," Grant pressed, her military instincts kicking in. "Are we being treated as a threat? If that's the case, I suggest we address it directly." Her words were firm, but there was an undercurrent of confusion beneath the surface. Humanity had worked tirelessly to build relations with the galaxy's powers, hoping to prove themselves as capable allies. But if the aliens were truly afraid, that would change everything. There was a long, uncomfortable silence, and then Xanthia, an alien diplomat from the far-flung Eklar race, spoke up. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but her words held a strange weight. "Humans are unpredictable," she said, her golden eyes locking with General Grant's. "We cannot afford to scan your technology, not yet. The consequences of understanding it fully might be catastrophic." Grant blinked, unsure of how to interpret the alien's words. "Catastrophic? Why? What do you mean?" Before Xanthia could answer, Soreth cut her off. "It's not the ship. It's you. The humans." His voice was low, tinged with fear. "Your species thrives on unpredictability. We cannot calculate the consequences of your creative ingenuity. It is dangerous." Grant's pulse quickened, the weight of his words settling on her like a cold stone. Could it be true? Were the aliens genuinely afraid of humanity's potential? She glanced at Captain Lucas Voss, standing near the door, watching the exchange with intense focus. His expression remained neutral, but she could see the flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Are you saying you're afraid of us?" Grant asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but the words echoed through the room. Soreth's eyes darted briefly toward Xanthia, who gave a subtle nod. "Yes," Soreth finally admitted. "You do not follow the rules. You break patterns, push boundaries, and in doing so, you evolve faster than any species we've encountered. Your military, it's unlike anything we've seen. We fear what you might become." A chill ran through Grant as the weight of his words settled on her. The aliens were scared, not of human technology, not of the warships themselves, but of what humanity could do with them. "What exactly do you fear?" Captain Voss finally spoke, his voice steady but laced with an edge of suspicion. That we might one day challenge your control, or that we'll simply outpace all of you. Soret's eyes glinted with a mixture of caution and regret. Both, he admitted softly. We have seen it before. There was a species, unlike any we had ever encountered. At first, they seemed weak. But then, they began to innovate, to evolve so quickly that we could not keep up. They destroyed entire fleets, outsmarted the greatest minds of our coalition. They wiped us out, not with sheer force, but with an ever-shifting strategy that no one could predict. They were like you. Grant's heart raced. The implications were staggering. The aliens were not just trying to avoid conflict. They were trying to prevent humanity from reaching a point where their creativity and unpredictability became an uncontrollable force. It was as if the galaxy's most powerful races feared that humanity might one day rise and challenge their dominance. You fear we might become like them? Grant asked, her voice tight with disbelief. Soreth nodded grimly. You are like them. And that is why we cannot scan your warships. The consequences of understanding your technology are too great. Grant stood, her mind racing. If the aliens truly feared humanity's creativity and adaptability, then their worst nightmare had just begun. Humanity had no intention of becoming anyone's pawn. But now, it seemed the galaxy's most powerful races might just force them into that position. As the meeting broke up, General Grant's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The aliens' admissions had unsettled her, but one thought echoed louder than the rest. They feared us. It wasn't just a passing concern. It was a calculated, deep-rooted fear. The alien coalition had seen something in humanity's potential that even they couldn't fully understand. But what exactly were they afraid of? And what would happen now? In the corridors of the space station, Grant made her way to a private briefing room. Captain Lucas Voss, her right-hand officer, was already there, his face lined with concern. He'd been listening carefully during the tense meeting, his eyes scanning the reactions of each alien race. He'd seen their discomfort. He knew the implications of their hesitation. Grant took a seat across from Voss, the weight of the situation settling over her. What do you think they're hiding? She asked. Her voice, normally commanding, now carried an edge of uncertainty. Voss leaned forward, his fingers tracing the edge of a map that displayed a sector of space, marking the location of the U.S. resilience and the surrounding alien fleets. It's clear they're afraid of us, of what we could become. But it's not just about our warships. It's us, as a species. We adapt, we innovate, and we do it quickly. He paused, looking up from the map. That's something no one in the galaxy is prepared for. Grant nodded. But why avoid scanning our technology? If we're that unpredictable, shouldn't they want to understand us more? Isn't that what they do with every other species? Voss's expression darkened. I think they've made a decision. They don't want to understand us. At least, not fully. If they analyze our tech, they might unlock something they can't control. It's like opening a door they can't close once it's been opened. Grant's thoughts turned to the past. She thought of humanity's rapid technological advancements, the way they'd gone from the primitive machines of the 20th century to warships capable of rivaling those of the galaxy's most advanced species. Earth's innovations were born from necessity, from the need to survive and protect their own. It was a trait all humans shared, their ability to innovate in the face of danger. What if they're right? Grant murmured. What if we are a threat? Voss looked her straight in the eye. I don't think it's about being a threat, Emma. It's about becoming one. We're not there yet, but they know we could be. He tapped the map, highlighting several points where human ships had recently deployed new technologies. Advanced shielding, stealth capabilities, and tactical maneuvers that no other fleet had ever seen. These are just the first steps. If the aliens are scared now, imagine what happens when we start pushing further. Grant's brow furrowed. And what do you propose we do? Voss paused, then spoke with quiet resolve. We need to test our limits. If they're avoiding us out of fear, then we need to show them that we're not just a passing threat. We need to force them to take us seriously, on our terms. The idea hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. If they were going to test humanity's place in the galaxy, they would need to take risks. Risks that could escalate tensions even further. Yet, as unsettling as it was, the more Grant thought about it, the more she realized that Voss was right. Humanity couldn't afford to cower in the shadows. If they wanted to stand on equal footing with the galaxy's greatest powers, they needed to prove they could hold their own. "I'll have a meeting with the Council," Grant said after a long pause. "We'll need to start strategizing, but we'll need to be smart about it. We can't let them see us as a direct threat, yet." Voss nodded. "Agreed. But the time to act is coming soon, Emma. We can't let fear paralyze us. We need to show them that humanity's unpredictability isn't something to be feared. It's something to be respected." As Grant left the briefing room, she felt the weight of the decision ahead. The fate of humanity in the galaxy had just taken a dangerous turn. The alien coalition had made it clear that they feared humanity's potential, but they didn't know the half of it. Back aboard the U.S. Resilience, Captain Voss stood alone in the command deck, looking out at the vast expanse of space. A part of him was exhilarated by the challenge that lay ahead. The galaxy had never faced anything like humanity before, something raw, unrefined, but capable of bending the very rules of warfare. And he knew one thing for sure: humanity would never back down from a fight. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon was its ability to think beyond the predictable. And that, perhaps, was the greatest threat of all. It had been weeks since the cryptic meeting with the alien delegation, and General Grant had started to wonder whether humanity's position in the galaxy was truly as precarious as the aliens claimed. But it wasn't until the sudden attack on the outpost that she began to fully grasp the magnitude of the situation. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of a distress signal from one of Earth's outer colonies. The transmission was garbled at first, but as the signal cleared, a chilling message became audible. "Unknown ships incoming. We are under attack. No contact with fleet." General Grant didn't waste a second. Within minutes, the U.S. Resilience was dispatched, its engines roaring to life as it broke free from the station's orbit. The ship's massive hull gleamed under the starlight, but even its formidable appearance couldn't quell the growing sense of unease that gripped Grant. She knew that this was no ordinary attack. It was the beginning of something larger. Captain Voss stood at the helm, his face a mask of determination, as he coordinated with Earth's remaining fleet to respond to the assault. "General," he said, glancing up from the comms console, "the attackers are using advanced stealth tech. We've barely detected them before they opened fire on the colony." "Who are they?" Grant asked, her tone sharp. Voss shook his head. "We're not sure yet. They're using tactics we've never seen before, attacking in waves, cutting off retreat routes, and isolating our forces. It's like they know exactly how we'd react." Grant clenched her jaw. It was happening sooner than she'd expected. Whatever intelligence the aliens had gathered about humanity, it seemed they weren't going to let Earth stand idly by in the galactic stage. This was no longer just about alliances and diplomacy. It was a battle for survival. The U.S. Resilience arrived at the colony's orbit just as another wave of enemy ships emerged from stealth, launching a barrage of energy blasts that scorched the surface. Without hesitation, Voss barked orders to engage the enemy, and the Resilience's massive guns thundered in response. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Voss ordered. "Deploy all decoys and initiate countermeasures." The human ships, equipped with a new array of counter-stealth technologies, launched decoy drones that scattered in all directions. The enemy ships, fooled by the sudden burst of energy signatures, hesitated for a critical moment. In that split second, the Resilience's crew sprang into action, executing a series of unconventional maneuvers that caught the attackers off guard. Instead of following predictable combat strategies, the human ships danced through the chaos, breaking patterns and hitting the enemy from unexpected angles. From the outside, the battle must have looked like a chaotic, erratic dance. Human ships diving, weaving and attacking with unpredictable precision. It was unlike anything the alien attackers had expected. Where they had anticipated a straightforward, methodical resistance, they encountered something completely alien to them: human creativity. The humans did not fight with rigid strategies, but with constant improvisation. Every move was an answer to an unasked question, and the attackers couldn't keep up. Inside the Resilience's command center, Grant stood beside Voss, watching the battle unfold on the holoscreens. "They're not following any standard military protocol," she muttered. "They don't know how to predict us." Voss glanced at her, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "They're learning. The hard way." The alien attackers, once confident in their superior numbers and technology, began to falter. Each time they thought they had cornered the human ships, they found themselves thwarted by an unexpected tactic or technology. The Resilience's unconventional use of its stealth systems, employing sudden bursts of invisibility combined with high-speed maneuvers, baffled the enemy at every turn. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn. Human forces, despite being outnumbered, fought with a relentless, unpredictable ferocity. They attacked with speed, confidence, and an almost chaotic elegance. It was as though the very unpredictability that the aliens feared was now their greatest weapon. The enemy was forced into retreat, and the last remaining ships flowed into the void, their once confident aura shattered by humanity's unrelenting assault. The silence that followed was deafening. General Grant stood still, her eyes fixed on the holo-display, the aftermath of the battle unfolding before her. The colony's surface was scared, but the attackers had been repelled. "Status report," she said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "Enemy fleet has retreated, General," Voss replied, turning from the comms console. "We've sustained light damage, but nothing we can't repair. The colony is damaged but intact." Grant nodded slowly. "We did it, but they weren't just attacking. This was a test." Voss raised an eyebrow. "A test?" Grant's expression darkened. "The aliens knew we would respond like this. They've been watching us, studying us. This attack wasn't just to weaken us. It was to see if we could outthink them. They needed to know if we had the creativity, the unpredictability, to make us a threat." A sudden realization hit Voss. "And now they know. They can't predict us." "Exactly," Grant said. "And that's why they fear us." For a moment, both of them stood in silence, the weight of their discovery settling heavily on their shoulders. The galaxy's most advanced alien races had just learned the true extent of humanity's potential, and the ramifications would ripple across the stars. The battle was over for now, but the real war, the war for humanity's place in the galaxy, had only just begun. In the aftermath of the battle, General Grant sat in her quarters, staring out the observation window. The stars were cold and distant, yet somehow comforting. The enemies they had just defeated were no ordinary raiders. This had been a test, and humanity had passed it. But the questions that lingered now were far more complex. If the aliens were testing them, what did it mean for the future? The sound of a soft chime interrupted her thoughts, signaling a secure communication. Grant straightened, already anticipating the nature of the message. Captain Voss's face appeared on the screen. His expression was serious, more than usual. "General," he began, "I've just received a transmission from an unlikely source. It's from Soreth, the Draxian leader." Grant's pulse quickened. She had not expected to hear from the aliens so soon, especially not after the way their last conversation had ended. Soreth had been clear. Humanity was something the aliens couldn't understand. And now, after the battle, that fear had likely only deepened. Why would he contact her now? "Put it through," Grant ordered. The screen flickered for a moment, and then Soreth's face appeared. His spindly form loomed in front of the camera, the shadows of his large ancient eyes heavy with something unfamiliar. "Guilt. I know this is unexpected, General Grant," Soreth began, "and I know that you must be wondering why I am contacting you. "Don't waste time with pleasantries, Soreth," Grant said, her voice sharp. "Why are you calling?" Soreth hesitated before continuing, his voice low, almost strained. "We have made a grave mistake in our assessment of your species. I have spoken to the Council. We underestimated you, and I fear we may have pushed you into a corner." Grant's brow furrowed, confused. "Pushed us into a corner? What do you mean?" Soreth took a deep breath, his gaze flicking toward something off-camera, as if searching for the right words. "Humanity is not just unpredictable in battle. It is your nature to innovate, to adapt. That alone would make you a threat in the eyes of the galaxy. But we've seen something more, something darker." Grant stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "There was a species, long gone now, that we once faced," Toreth continued, his tone heavy with sorrow. "A species like yours. They were primitive in their ways, but they had something that made them dangerous to us. They used innovation and creativity not just to win battles, but to destroy entire empires, including ours. At the height of their technological growth, we underestimated them, and it cost us dearly." Grant leaned forward, her interest piqued despite herself. "You're saying that humanity could destroy your empire?" Soreth's eyes glinted with a cold, deep-seated fear. "Not just ours, General. We have learned, painfully, that once a species like yours gains the ability to innovate in the way you have, there's no predicting where it stops. We thought we could control the rise of your species, keep you in check, but it seems we were wrong." Grant sat back, digesting this revelation. The truth was more unsettling than anything she could have imagined. The aliens' fear wasn't just about human technology. It was about humanity's essence. The way they thought. The way they didn't follow the same rigid paths other species took. The way they pushed past their limits, time and time again. "How long have you known this?" Grant asked, her voice cold. Soreth's gaze softened slightly, though the gravity of his words remained. "We suspected for some time, but we only confirmed it after we observed your victory. You see, General, what you did today wasn't just a battle tactic. It was something that no one else in the galaxy could have done. You fought like a species that doesn't just innovate, but thrives on the chaos of uncertainty. You adapt, you live in the unknown. That is the true power of humanity." Grant felt a chill run through her. The implications were terrifying. The galaxy's most advanced powers had been watching, studying, and slowly growing more frightened of humanity's potential. They had tried to prevent their rise by keeping them on the sidelines, by keeping them ignorant of their own capabilities. But they had failed. "Then what happens now, Soreth?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Do we fight a war with your entire coalition, or do we try to find a way to avoid it?" Soreth hesitated before replying, and for a long moment, the silence was deafening. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "The choice is yours, General. But know this, the galaxy will not be able to ignore you much longer. The Coalition will attempt to control or eliminate what they cannot predict, and you, your people, are now a force that cannot be contained." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Grant in the cold silence of her quarters. The weight of Soreth's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Humanity wasn't just a new player on the galactic stage anymore. They had become a force, an unknown, unpredictable entity that the galaxy's greatest powers feared and couldn't control. Her thoughts raced, but one thing was clear. The time for diplomacy was over. Humanity's future in the galaxy was no longer about alliances or politics. It was about survival. It was about proving to the galaxy that their unpredictability was their greatest strength. And General Grant knew one thing for certain. Humanity was ready. The question now was, were the aliens ready for humanity's next move? The stars outside the U.S. Resilience's command deck were as cold and distant as ever, but for General Grant, the quiet beauty of space had lost its comfort. The galaxy was no longer just a vast expanse of unknown. It was a battleground. Humanity had unknowingly crossed a threshold, And now the galaxy's greatest powers were watching, waiting. The message from Xoreth had left a bitter taste in her mouth. She now knew the truth. Humanity had become something more dangerous than even the alien coalition had anticipated. The battle they had just fought was no longer just a defense of their colony. It had been a statement, a demonstration of humanity's potential. And that statement had sent ripples throughout the galaxy, shaking the foundations of the fragile alliances that had existed for centuries. Now, Earth was on the precipice of something much larger. A war. A war not just for survival, but for dominance. Grant paced in the command center, her mind running through the implications of everything she had learned. Xoreth had warned her of the Coalition's intentions, to control or eliminate what they could not understand. And humanity, for better or worse, had just made itself an enemy to the galaxy's most powerful races. General, Captain Voss's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone as steady as always. We've just received word from the United Earth Council. They're calling for a full mobilization of our forces. Grant nodded, barely acknowledging the news. The Council had seen the writing on the wall long before she had. Earth's militaries were already on high alert, but now it was official. Earth was preparing for a conflict that could engulf the entire galaxy. Have they issued any orders regarding our engagement strategy? She asked, her voice sharp. Voss glanced at the tactical readout on the screen. They're recommending we maintain a defensive posture, fortifying our colonies and holding strategic positions. They also want to establish direct communication with the alien factions, attempt diplomacy before we escalate the situation further. Grant shook her head. Diplomacy is a luxury we don't have anymore. Xoreth made it clear. The Coalition won't stop until they have a solution to what they see as a growing threat. Agreed, Voss said, his face hardening. We can't afford to sit back and wait for them to make the first move. The galaxy already sees us as unpredictable, but if we start taking initiative, we might just gain the upper hand. Grant's eyes narrowed, a plan forming in her mind. We need to do what they fear most. Push the boundaries of what we can do. If we show them that humanity isn't afraid of the unknown, they might hesitate long enough to give us the advantage. Voss looked at her, the hint of a grin creeping onto his face. Unpredictability. You're right. We need to become the chaos they can't calculate. Before Grant could respond, the tactical officer at the back of the room called out, General, you'll want to see this. She quickly turned toward the screen. A new transmission had just come in. It was from the Draxian fleet, a message from Xoreth himself. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear from him again so soon, not after their last conversation. Put it through, she ordered. Xoreth's face appeared on the screen, his usual cold demeanor replaced by a rare, troubled expression. General Grant, he began, his voice urgent. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Council anymore. We are no longer in control of the situation. Grant's brows furrowed. What do you mean? What's happening? Xoreth's words came out in a rush, his usually calculated voice trembling. There are factions within the Coalition, forces that see humanity as a threat that must be eradicated immediately. They've already begun mobilizing against you. I've tried to warn them, tried to convince them that the cost of confronting your species would be too great, but it's too late. The war is already in motion. Grant's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a cold war of diplomacy and strategic posturing anymore. The first shots had already been fired. The galaxy's most powerful races were now officially at war with humanity. I need to know if you're with us, Xoreth, Grant said, her voice firm despite the gravity of the situation. We can't fight this alone. You know we don't have the resources to stand against the entire Coalition. Xoreth's eyes flickered with hesitation, but he nodded. I cannot stop what is coming, General. The Coalition's decision has been made, but you will not face it alone. We will offer what assistance we can, though it may not be enough to change the outcome. He paused, then added with a sense of finality. But if you survive, humanity will stand at the center of the galaxy's future. You will either become the greatest force the galaxy has ever known, or the first of your kind to fall. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Grant standing motionless, the weight of his words crashing down on her. The war had begun in earnest, and humanity was no longer an unknown entity. It was the very center of a galactic storm. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now rested on the shoulders of those who were willing to fight for humanity's place in the stars. Grant turned to Voss, her expression resolute. "Prepare the fleet. We're not waiting for them to strike first. We're taking the fight to them." Voss's eyes burned with fierce determination. "Understood, General. The galaxy won't know what hit it. The U.S. Resilience, humanity's first true warship of the stars, was ready to lead Earth's forces into the fight. The battle for humanity's future had just begun, and General Grant knew one thing for certain: there would be no turning back. The U.S. Resilience cut through the void of space like a spear, its engines humming with the power of a force that had never been seen before. General Grant stood at the helm, her mind sharp and focused on the task at hand. The fleet was ready, Earth's forces assembled and coordinated, each ship a testament to humanity's rapid technological evolution. They had learned quickly that the galaxy didn't respect weakness. Diplomacy had failed. Now, it was time for action. "Captain Voss," Grant said, her voice steady. "Report." Voss's voice came through, calm and authoritative. "Fleet is in position. We're on course for the Seraph Expanse. Intelligence suggests the Draxian Coalition's command ship is stationed there, heavily guarded. If we can take it down, we can disrupt their operations significantly." Grant nodded, the plan clear in her mind. The Seraph Expanse was a strategically significant region. If the humans could strike at the heart of the Draxian fleet, it would send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. "Engage the fleet on my mark," she ordered, her eyes locking on the star maps flashing across the screens. "We don't just need to win this battle. We need to make them understand what they've provoked." Voss glanced at her, his expression fierce. "Understood, General. All ships are ready to follow your command." Grant's hand hovered over the activation button, the moment of truth approaching. The countdown in her mind was growing louder, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't about hesitation. It wasn't about fear. It was about survival. "Mark," she called. In an instant, the fleet of human warships surged forward. The U.S. Resilience led the charge, its powerful engines roaring to life, pushing the ship through the void with astonishing speed. The rest of the fleet followed, their weapons primed, their trajectories locked onto the Draxian command ship and its surrounding defenses. As the fleet moved into attack range, enemy ships emerged from the dark expanse like phantoms, their sleek, angular forms gliding through the stars. The Draxians weren't expecting a full-scale assault. Their defenses were concentrated on the perimeter, not on a direct, full frontal attack. But humanity's unpredictable nature, the very thing the aliens had feared, took them by surprise. The human fleet didn't move in typical formation. Instead, they split into smaller, faster groups, each one weaving in and out of the Draxian defensive grid, exploiting every gap, every moment of vulnerability. "We've got their flank," Voss shouted, his voice alive with excitement. Shields holding, energy weapons primed. Grant could see it all unfolding before her. Humanity wasn't following the expected patterns. The Draxians had anticipated a conventional fight, with slow, methodical advances. But humanity attacked with wild, erratic movements, forcing their enemies to constantly adjust, never allowing them to settle into a rhythm. The Resilience's cannons unleashed a devastating barrage of fire, slamming into the lead Draxian ship. It rocked violently, but remained operational. However, the sudden blast sent shockwaves through the enemy formation, causing chaos among their ranks. "We're getting through their shields," Voss called out, his eyes locked on the tactical readouts. "They're retreating." But the victory wasn't guaranteed. The Draxians had sent reinforcements, an enormous fleet, much larger than anticipated. As more ships appeared, Grant's heart skipped. The initial success of their surprise attack could easily be overshadowed by this new threat. "Hold formation," Grant barked. "Prepare for evasive action. We can't afford to lose momentum now." Voss's face was grim. "Understood, General." Preparing countermeasures. A flash of brilliant light erupted in the distance. The Draxian fleet had launched an overwhelming wave of energy weapons, flooding the area with deadly precision. The human ships swerved and darted in erratic patterns, dodging the beams with unparalleled speed, but the attacks were relentless. Grant's fingers gripped the command chair tighter. They had the initiative. Now was the time to strike. "Deploy the interceptors," she ordered, her voice unwavering. "We've trained for this moment. They can't keep up with our unpredictability." Hundreds of smaller, agile fighter craft, human interceptors, launched from the Resilience and the rest of the fleet. They cut through space with surgical precision, weaving through the chaos, engaging Draxian ships with guerrilla tactics. The Draxian forces couldn't anticipate their unpredictable trajectories. Even with superior numbers, they were losing the edge. The battle raged on, but now it was clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were showing the galaxy that they could win. The Resilience and its fleet danced through the chaos, adapting on the fly, using every advantage they could muster. Then, a massive explosion shook the battlefield. The Draxian command ship, once the backbone of their forces, was gone. The human fleet had broken through their final line of defense, and the Coalition's grip on the Seraph Expanse shattered. The remaining Draxian ships hesitated, unsure of how to respond to this sudden shift in momentum. General Grant's eyes never left the tactical map. The battle was far from over. But in that moment, she could feel the power shift. Humanity had struck first, and they had struck with the chaos and unpredictability that the aliens feared. The message had been sent. "Fleet status?" she asked, still watching the battle unfold. "We've won the engagement, General," Voss reported. "Draxian forces are retreating. We've inflicted significant damage to their command structure." Grant's lips curled into a grim smile. "Let's make sure they remember this." As the battle began to wind down, Grant allowed herself a moment of quiet victory. Humanity had proven itself capable of fighting back, not just with weapons, but with the very thing that made them unique. The Draxians would be forced to reconsider their approach, but more importantly, the galaxy would know that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. But the war was far from over, and General Grant knew that the true test of humanity's strength was just beginning. The aftermath of the Seraph Expanse battle had left the galaxy buzzing with tension. Humanity had dealt a significant blow to the Draxian coalition, but the victory was bittersweet. The coalition's response was swift, and the galaxy's political landscape was shifting in ways General Grant hadn't anticipated. The word was out. Humanity was no longer a bystander in the galactic theater. They were a force to be reckoned with, and every alien faction, from the arrogant Kroth to the calculating Veltari, was now paying attention. On the U.S. Resilience, Grant stared at the glowing tactical maps on the command deck, her fingers brushing over the holographic interface as she reviewed the latest fleet movements. The battle had been intense, but the true consequences were still unfolding. "General," Captain Voss called out, his tone tense, "we've just intercepted a transmission from the Veltari. They're preparing a counterattack. Their fleet is mobilizing at the edge of the Cephi cluster." Grant's eyes narrowed. The Veltari were one of the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, known for their vast knowledge and ruthless precision in battle. But what worried Grant the most wasn't their advanced technology. It was their diplomatic maneuvering. The Veltari had always been the diplomatic brokers in the galaxy, and now they were aligning against humanity. "Get me the fleet commander on the line," Grant ordered. A moment later, Fleet Commander Jenkins appeared on the screen, his face grim. "General, we're tracking the Veltari ships. They're not just preparing a typical assault. They're assembling their entire fleet for an overwhelming strike. We've never seen them move this quickly before. Grant's mind raced. The Veltari's rapid deployment wasn't just about retaliation. It was a message. The message was clear. Humanity's unpredictability had to be contained. They weren't going to let the humans grow any stronger. And the Veltari weren't just going to fight. They were going to demolish humanity's newfound influence. "How long do we have?" Grant asked, her voice steady, despite the growing weight on her shoulders. Jenkins glanced at his screen, calculating. At current speeds, they'll be within striking range in approximately 20 hours. They'll hit us hard, General. We can't afford to engage them head-on without reinforcements. Grant took a deep breath. Reinforcements. Earth's allies had been hesitant to commit fully to their cause, but if there was ever a time for them to take a stand, it was now. The entire fate of humanity's future in the galaxy rested on their shoulders. "Captain Voss," she called out, her gaze never leaving the screen. "Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers. We'll need to buy as much time as possible." Voss met her gaze with a sharp nod. "Understood, General." Grant paced, her mind spinning with options. Earth's fleets had performed admirably in the last battle, but against the full might of the Veltari, they were outclassed. The human ships were fast, erratic, and deadly in unconventional combat. But the Veltari were masters of the long-range strike, their technology capable of devastating anything they touched. She could feel the pressure mounting. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, but now it was time to prove that they weren't just a one-off anomaly. They were here to stay. But that would mean challenging the most formidable adversaries the galaxy had ever known. "We're not going to outrun them," Grant muttered to herself, her mind already working through their options. "We'll have to outthink them." She turned back to the screen. "Get me a direct line to the Draxians." Voss looked at her in surprise. "General, you're not considering an alliance with them, are you?" Grant's lips pressed into a thin line. "We have no choice. The Veltari are a threat to all of us. If we don't act together, we'll all fall. I need to know if the Draxians are willing to cooperate." A tense silence filled the command center. Captain Voss nodded, his hands flying over the controls. "Making contact now." The screen flickered and Soreth's face appeared once again. The Draxian leader's eyes were hard, his usually calm demeanor replaced by the uncertainty of a strategist forced into a corner. "You are making a grave decision, General," Soreth began, his voice low. "An alliance with us could send shockwaves through the galaxy, but the Veltari, they are too powerful. If they are allowed to strike now, we will all suffer. It is not just humanity that they will seek to control. They will dismantle the balance of power across the galaxy." Grant stood tall, meeting his gaze. "Then let's dismantle them first. Humanity can no longer sit on the sidelines, waiting for permission to exist. We will fight, and we will win." Soreth's gaze hardened, and a rare fleeting expression of respect flickered in his eyes. "Very well. We will join you. Together, we will challenge the Veltari. But be warned, General, once we strike, there will be no turning back. The galaxy will be divided, and the consequences will be severe." Grant nodded. "We're prepared for that. I'll be in contact with the Earth Council. Get your fleet in position. We move in 12 hours. As the screen went dark, Grant stood still for a moment, allowing the weight of her decision to sink in. She had just forged an alliance with the very species that had once feared humanity's unpredictability. But now, their fear was their greatest asset. Together, they could face the Veltari. But would it be enough? The war was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy. And General Grant knew one thing for certain: humanity would not fall quietly into the background. It was time for them to take their place in the stars. The tension aboard the U.S. Resilience was palpable. General Grant stood on the command deck, watching as the fleet readied itself for the most crucial battle humanity had ever faced. The alliance with the Draxians had been forged, but the consequences of their decision still hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The Veltari fleet, an overwhelming force of precision and power, was now just hours away. This wasn't just another battle. It was a chance to secure humanity's future in a galaxy that had once seen them as nothing more than an afterthought. "General," Captain Voss said, breaking her reverie, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "The Draxian fleet has confirmed readiness. They've deployed their most advanced warships, and we've synchronized our tactics. We're ready for the Veltari." Grant nodded, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "Good. Our fleet is prepared, but remember, the Veltari's advantage is their technology and their ability to strike from a distance. We need to draw them in, force them to play our game." She turned toward the holomap, watching the positions of the Allied fleets take shape. The Draxians had positioned themselves to cover the flanks, while humanity's ships, led by the Resilients, would spearhead the attack, using speed and agility to create chaos and disrupt the Veltari's formation. "We can't let them dictate the pace of this fight," Grant continued, her voice low but resolute. "Our goal is to neutralize their long-range weapons and force them into close quarters. We've trained for this. We just need to make them believe that we don't fear them." Voss's eyes narrowed in determination. "Understood, General. I'll relay the orders to the fleet." Grant turned back to the command deck, her eyes meeting the stars outside the ship's viewports. She could feel the weight of what was at stake. This battle would decide the fate of not just Earth, but every species that had ever doubted humanity's place in the galaxy. "Status report from the Veltari," she asked, her voice still calm, despite the storm swirling in her mind. "We've intercepted their movements," the tactical officer replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "They're approaching the Cephide cluster at maximum speed, but their ships are still spread out. They're expecting us to come to them." Grant's lips curled into a slight smile. "Let's disappoint them." The battlefield had been set. Humanity's fleet, reinforced by the Draxians, was positioned at the outer edges of the Cephide cluster, a dense and dangerous area filled with asteroids and debris. The perfect environment to hide, to strike, to disrupt. It was humanity's greatest advantage, the ability to adapt, to use what others saw as obstacles as stepping stones toward victory. Grant stood at the front of the command center, her eyes fixed on the screen displaying the incoming Veltari fleet. It was massive. Their sleek ships, brimming with advanced weaponry, lined up with terrifying precision. The battle ahead would be no simple skirmish. "They're locking onto us," Captain Voss said, his voice tense. "They'll be in range within minutes." "Good," Grant replied, her fingers tapping on the console. "We'll use that to our advantage. Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers on my mark. Captain, deploy the decoys. Let's give them something to chase." The decoys, human-designed drones that mimicked the signature of a full fleet, were launched in a perfect formation, creating the illusion of a larger, more vulnerable target. The Veltari, ever precise, took the bait, focusing their long-range fire on the decoys as their ships closed in. "Now," Grant commanded. With a flash, humanity's fleet, using the debris of the Cephide cluster as cover, burst into motion. The human ships were smaller and more nimble than the Veltari's warships, and their unpredictable patterns threw off the Veltari's targeting systems. The Veltari, expecting a slow, predictable advance, were forced to recalibrate their strategy, their ships scattering to adapt. "Direct hit on their forward flank," Voss shouted. "We've taken down a major section of their command vessel's shielding." Grant's pulse quickened. The Veltari were not accustomed to this kind of engagement. Their military doctrine emphasized precision, and now their once impenetrable lines were fractured. Humanity's chaos, unpredictability, and sheer will to survive were breaking their grip. But even as Grant reveled in their success, she knew the battle was far from won. The Veltari were relentless. In retaliation, they unleashed a devastating barrage of energy weapons, tearing through space with brutal force. A Veltari ship, their flagship, turned its guns on the Resilience itself, firing a volley that shook the entire fleet. Shields holding, Voss reported, though his voice was strained. "We're taking damage, but we're still operational." Grant's knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrests of her chair. They couldn't afford to take too many hits like that. If they did, they'd lose their momentum. It was time to play their final card. "Deploy the interceptors," she said, her voice unwavering. "It's time to go in close." Hundreds of fighter craft launched from the Resilience, diving into the chaos of the battlefield. The interceptors, agile and deadly, swarmed the Velteri ships, attacking their vulnerable underbellies with precision. The Velteri were skilled, but humanity's fighters, unpredictable and fearless, were tearing through their lines. As the battle raged on, the Velteri flagship began to falter, its systems struggling to maintain cohesion under the relentless assault. Grant could see it in the Velteri's movements. They were breaking. They hadn't anticipated the ferocity of the human attack. "We've got them on the ropes," Voss said, a rare spark of hope in his voice. "They're retreating." Grant's heart pounded as the final moments of the battle unfolded. The Velteri were forced to withdraw, their flagship crippled and their forces in disarray. Humanity and the Draxians had won, against all odds. The galaxy had been watching, and now they would know that humanity was no longer a passive player. They had arrived, and they were here to stay.